The air in my apartment in Houston was already thick with that familiar, humid pre-dawn mugginess, even before the sun dared to peek over the horizon. I remember staring at my reflection in the bathroom mirror that morning, trying to summon an extra burst of confidence. My name is Emma, and I was 28 years old at the time, facing a really important work presentation in Dallas later that day. It was the kind of presentation that could genuinely move my career forward, a stepping stone I'd been working towards for years, and the pressure was definitely getting to me. I had meticulously prepared everything, every slide, every speaking point, but the early flight, the rush, the sheer magnitude of what lay ahead, it all contributed to a knot of anxiety that had taken root deep in my stomach. I carefully applied my makeup, aiming for professional and polished, hoping it would hide the faint shadows under my eyes from restless sleep. My outfit was a smart, tailored pantsuit, chosen specifically to convey competence and seriousness, but it felt a little stiff against my skin, adding to the general sense of discomfort. Leaving my apartment, the streets were still mostly quiet, a rare occurrence in a city as sprawling as Houston. I drove myself to George Bush Intercontinental Airport, or IAH as we call it, the car humming softly beneath me, a stark contrast to the buzzing chaos I knew awaited me. As I pulled into the parking garage, the first tendrils of stress began to wrap around me tighter. The walk from the garage, the shuttle bus ride to the terminal, the sight of the throngs of people already in motion, even at this ungodly hour, it all felt like a gauntlet. The terminal was, as always, a symphony of hurried footsteps, loudspeaker announcements, and the low murmur of countless conversations. I checked in my main luggage, keeping only my carry-on with my presentation materials and essentials close, a silent prayer escaping my lips that everything would be smooth sailing from here on out. Of course, the universe had other plans. The security line, my least favorite part of any travel day, was already snaking through the concourse like a tired, grumpy serpent. It seemed endless, a slow-moving river of humanity, all equally impatient and bleary-eyed. This was back when we all still had to take our shoes off, before the convenience of things like pre-check, which meant even more fumbling and delay. I sighed, resigned, and joined the queue, clutching my carry-on and my purse tightly. I glanced at my watch, doing the mental math to ensure I still had plenty of time, but the anxiety was a persistent hum under my skin. People were shuffling forward, eyes fixed ahead, a collective silent understanding of the inefficiency and necessity of the process. I was just trying to keep my head down, focus on getting through, on conserving my energy for the big presentation later. I was meticulously planning out my next steps, getting my laptop out, my liquids bag, taking off my shoes, trying to be as efficient as possible. My internal monologue was already running through the opening lines of my presentation, practicing intonation and delivery, trying to find my professional voice amidst the din of the airport. That's when she appeared. One moment, I was inching forward, contemplating the merits of ordering a very large, very strong coffee once I cleared security. The next, a figure in a sharp, expensive-looking business suit, complete with impossibly high heels that clacked on the tiled floor, smoothly inserted herself in front of me. She didn't even glance back, just moved with an air of complete entitlement, as if the line parted for her by divine right. My breath hitched. I wasn't typically one to cause a scene, to raise my voice, but the brazenness of it, combined with my already frayed nerves, pushed something in me. It felt like a direct assault on my already fragile peace. My heart pounded a little faster, a mix of indignation and disbelief bubbling up. "Hey," I blurted out, my voice coming out a little weaker than I intended, but still audible above the general airport hum. My cheeks flushed, feeling the eyes of the people behind me, though they were probably just grateful it wasn't them being cut off. She finally turned, a slow, deliberate movement that felt laden with contempt. Her gaze, cool and dismissive, swept over me from head to toe, lingering for a fraction of a second too long, a silent judgment that sliced deeper than any words could. Her expression was utterly devoid of apology, a mask of annoyance. She shrugged, a tiny, almost imperceptible lift of her shoulders, and in a voice that was both imperious and utterly uncaring, she said, "I have a plane to catch." My jaw nearly dropped. Did she think I did? Did she think everyone else in this seemingly endless line was just here for entertainment? The absurdity of her statement, combined with her condescending tone, ignited a spark of genuine anger within me. My carefully constructed composure, the professional veneer I'd worked so hard to maintain that morning, threatened to crack. "Well, yeah," I retorted, my voice rising a notch, unable to believe her gall. "So does everyone in this line." It was a weak comeback, I knew it, but it was all I could manage in the face of such audacious rudeness. I braced myself for another dismissive shrug, maybe a sigh of impatience, but what came next was far worse. Her eyes narrowed, her lips curled into a sneer, and she spat out the words, "Shut the freak up, fat ass." The words hit me like a physical blow. My face burned, not just with anger, but with profound humiliation. In front of a line full of strangers, I had been called a fat ass. The air seemed to solidify around me, every sound in the airport fading away except the ringing in my ears. I felt utterly exposed, vulnerable, and completely powerless. My carefully cultivated professional demeanor shattered. All the anxiety about my presentation, about my career, suddenly paled in comparison to the searing sting of that insult. I stood there, speechless, watching as she turned her back on me again and continued her march towards the security scanner. It was a moment of profound defeat. I wanted to scream, to lash out, to make her understand the depth of her cruelty, but my throat felt tight, my voice gone. I just stood there, mortified, the weight of her words pressing down on me. She went through the machine ahead of me, obviously, leaving me to process the insult and the sudden, overwhelming feeling of smallness. My mind replayed the incident, the venom in her voice, the dismissive flick of her wrist. I was so caught up in my own internal turmoil that I almost missed what happened next. As she reached the other side, the metal detector let out a sharp, insistent beep. She had forgotten something in her pocket. The young Transportation Security Administration agent, a woman who looked barely in her 20s, with kind but tired eyes, calmly instructed her that she needed to go back and place the item in a bin. Instead of complying, the well-dressed woman started berating and arguing with the TSA agents, her voice sharp and cutting, accusing them of making her miss her flight. Her indignation was palpable but completely misplaced. She was unbelievably rude, her tirade specifically directed at the young woman who had initially stopped her, who now looked visibly upset, her shoulders slumping slightly under the verbal assault. Seeing that, a fresh wave of anger, this time righteous, surged through me. It wasn't just about me anymore. It was about this woman's general cruelty, her complete disregard for anyone else's feelings or job. I finally reached the scanner, my own mind a whirlwind of hurt and indignation. I meticulously took off my shoes, placed my laptop and liquids in the bins, and walked through the archway, my eyes still fixed on the scene unfolding ahead. After I retrieved my belongings, I could still hear the tail end of her argument. I was moving a little slower than usual, my mind still reeling from the encounter, but a part of me was also morbidly fascinated. Her items were already out of the scanner, piled haphazardly on the table a little further down. My eyes scanned them. A small, elegant handbag, a jacket, and a pair of very expensive-looking high heels. Only one of them was in the bin to be x-rayed, the other one was sitting there, forgotten amidst the chaos of her tantrum. That one shoe. It sat there, gleaming under the fluorescent lights, a symbol of her entitlement, her complete disdain for everyone around her, including me and that poor TSA agent. And then, a thought, mischievous and utterly impulsive, flickered through my mind. It wasn't a plan, not really. It was an instinct, a sudden, powerful urge to reclaim some shred of the dignity she had stripped from me, to push back against the blatant disrespect. I hesitated for a mere second, my heart hammering against my ribs, a rapid, frantic rhythm that echoed the pounding in my ears. The adrenaline surged, sharp and almost painful. My mind screamed at me, "Don't do it, Emma, you'll get arrested, there are cameras everywhere." But another, more primal voice whispered back, "She called you a fat ass. She humiliated you. She deserves it." The image of the young TSA agent's defeated expression, the echo of her cruel words, fueled my resolve. This wasn't just for me, it was for all the other people she had probably stepped over, figuratively and literally. It was an impulse born of anger, humiliation, and a sudden, desperate need to feel something other than helplessness. My hand, almost of its own accord, reached out. Quickly, surreptitiously, I snatched it, just one of her high heels. It was light, surprisingly so, and the moment it was in my grasp, a jolt of both terror and exhilarating defiance shot through me. My immediate reaction was pure, unadulterated panic. My heart felt like it was going to burst out of my chest, a frantic bird trapped in a cage. I clutched the single shoe, tucking it almost desperately into my carry-on bag, and started walking. No, not walking. I was power walking, practically sprinting away from the security area, my eyes darting around wildly. Every camera mounted on the ceiling felt like it was specifically focused on me, zooming in on my face, ready to capture my act of petty larceny. I could almost hear the security alarms blaring, the shouts of TSA agents demanding I stop. My mind was a chaotic jumble of questions and self-recrimination. Why the hell did I do that? What was I thinking? I'm going to get arrested. My job presentation, my entire trip, all of it is ruined. The rush of adrenaline that had propelled my hand forward was now morphing into a cold, terrifying dread. My flight was still a little while away, giving me a precious window of time, and in my panic-stricken state, a desperate, almost movie-like plan began to form. I needed to disappear, to become someone else, even if only for a short while. I hopped on the airside train, the rumbling of the car beneath my feet doing little to calm my racing pulse. Each stop felt too long, each moment an eternity as I imagined the well-dressed woman finally realizing her shoe was missing, the security staff reviewing footage, tracking my every move. I chose a random concourse, far from my actual departure gate, and practically burst out of the train doors. My eyes scanned for a safe haven, a place to execute my escape plan. A lavatory. Perfect. I practically dove into the nearest ladies' room. Once inside, in the relative privacy of a stall, I quickly pulled out the stolen high heel. It looked so innocent, sitting there on the floor of the stall, completely out of place. With trembling hands, I tossed it into the large, industrial-sized garbage can, burying it under a pile of paper towels and other refuse. A small, almost imperceptible sigh of relief escaped me, a tiny victory in the midst of my terror. Next, the incognito part of my plan. I rummaged through my carry-on, pulling out a spare t-shirt, a plain, neutral gray one, and quickly changed out of my professional blouse. Then I pulled out a baseball cap I usually kept for bad hair days, tugging it low over my forehead. My long hair, which I had styled meticulously that morning, was hastily tucked up underneath the cap, a clumsy bun barely held in place. I looked at myself in the mirror above the sinks. I looked nothing like the Emma who had entered security. My heart was still pounding, but a flicker of satisfaction, a small, defiant spark, ignited within me. Mission Impossible Incognito, I thought, a ridiculous phrase that somehow brought a tiny, shaky smile to my lips. I actually thought, truly believed, that if they were following me with cameras, if they had somehow identified me, this quick change would throw them off. And in that moment, running on pure adrenaline and a touch of delusion, I felt an almost smug confidence that I had succeeded. I exited the lavatory, trying to appear nonchalant, my head down, and made my way back to the train, this time heading towards my actual gate. The journey felt surreal. Every uniformed officer I saw, every security camera seemed to be scrutinizing me. I kept telling myself, you did it, you got away with it. And as the minutes ticked by, as I reached my gate without incident, as I eventually boarded my flight to Dallas, a profound sense of relief washed over me. No alarms, no arrests, no stern questions from security. I had made it. My presentation was still on, my career aspirations still intact. I settled into my seat on the plane, fastening my seatbelt, and finally allowed myself to breathe deeply. The initial panic began to subside, replaced by a lingering thrill, an almost giddy feeling of triumph. That woman only had a small handbag. I knew for a fact she didn't have an extra pair of shoes on her. I never found out what truly transpired after I boarded my flight, never saw her again, never heard a peep about a one-shoed woman stranded at IAH. And perhaps that's why my revenge, while sweet, wasn't as fully satisfying as it could have been. There was no grand reveal, no public shaming I could witness. But that didn't stop me from playing out the scenarios in my head, over and over again, each one more satisfying than the last. I imagine her first thought, once she finally collected her senses and her remaining belongings, was that her shoe must have gotten stuck in the security machine somehow. I could picture her frantic search, her growing frustration, her increasingly loud complaints directed at the long-suffering TSA agents. I do feel a tiny pang of guilt, a whisper of regret, if my actions held up other innocent passengers, extending their already tedious wait. But that fleeting guilt was quickly overshadowed by the vivid, almost cinematic recreations in my mind. Eventually, she must have realized it wasn't the machine. She must have remembered the verbal exchange, the person she had so casually insulted, the woman she had dismissed as a fat ass. She must have put it together. The recognition, the dawning realization of what had happened, who had done it, that's the part I truly relish. I could practically see her face, shifting from confusion to outrage, the righteous anger she directed at everyone else now turning inwards, mixed with a healthy dose of pure, unadulterated shock. I laugh hysterically to myself even now, 20 years later, whenever the memory resurfaces. I imagine her hopping through the concourse, one high heel clacking loudly, the other foot bare, her expensive suit now looking ridiculous in contrast to her predicament. Or maybe she had to buy a cheap, ill-fitting pair of flip-flops from an airport shop, ruining her carefully curated ensemble. The thought fills me with a malicious glee that I'm not entirely proud of, but also can't deny. It was a moment of unexpected, impulsive defiance, a small act of rebellion against outright cruelty and entitlement. Lesson learned, you know? Perhaps for her, perhaps for me. It certainly taught me that even the most unassuming person can find a surprising well of nerve when pushed too far. The presentation in Dallas? It went well, actually. I delivered it with a confidence I didn't entirely realize I possessed, a faint echo of the audacity that had propelled me to take that shoe still humming in my veins. My career did take off after that, but every time I stepped onto an airplane, every time I went through security, a tiny, secret smile would play on my lips, a silent acknowledgement of the day I found my own, unique way to stand up for myself.